I get depressed a lot. I don't know if anyone here gets depressed, but depression's interesting because people who don't get depressed, they always think that you're sad. No, sadness and depression are very different things, right? Sadness is like something happens in your life and temporarily you feel sad about it. Depression is a medical condition where you see things for what they are.
A major depressive disorder is a form of emotional or affective disorder, where it finds its place in the subcategory of mood disorders where emotions quantitatively deviate from the norm. In other words, a certain set of emotions is more elevated than it normally should be. In this category, we can also find disorders like hypomania or mania, a mood state characterized by a persistent disinhibition and mood elevation, also called euphoria, or the state of euthymia, a tranquil mental state or mood. When it comes to depression, the enhanced set of emotions typically includes the emotion of sadness, anxiety, anhedonia, the inability to feel pleasure, and sometimes anger. That's what distinguishes depression from qualitatively deviating mood disorders. While we all experience sadness, it's the enhanced and elevated extreme and duration in a major depressive disorder that makes it stand out. While other mood disorders, such as parathemia, which is characterized by having an abnormal, paradoxical, contrary, or inappropriate mood, for example, when being cheerful and upbeat in a situation where people would normally mourn or grieve, deviates not in intensity, but in its whole quality from the norm. But what even are the symptoms of a depression? Are you just sadder and more unmotivated than others, and that is all? In psychiatry, every disorder gets classified by its effects on all features and dimensions of human functionality. A short clinical picture of depression could be the following. The epidemiology of depression, or in other words, the study of the rate of incidence and distribution of the major depressive disorder in certain populations, suggests that the lifetime prevalence of depression varies widely across the globe, from 3% in Japan to 17% in the US. That means that there is a probability of 17% of you having at least one depressive episode in your life while walking on US ground. A study showed that the number of people who suffer from depression during their lives falls within an 8 to 12% range in most of them. Some years ago, depression was the fourth most urgent health problem worldwide, and it was estimated that as of now, 2020, it should climb to be at number 2. A study from the National Survey on Drug Use and Health from 2017 showed that the prevalence of a major depressive episode was higher among adult females, 8.7%, compared to males, 5.3%, and highest among individuals ages 18 to 25. Don't be a female between the age of 18 and 25 and move to Japan, and you should be fine, I guess. Unless you have a major biological predisposition to it. Then it shouldn't matter what you do. Or? Etiology is the study of causation, and in our case, it can give us some of the answers to what is the origin of depression. Throughout history, there was a hard distinction between natural causes and environmental ones in psychology and medicine. Natural causes of depression can be found in our whole biology, which includes our neurochemistry, such as a deficit in monoamines, a specific group of neurotransmitters that include noradrenaline, dopamine, and serotonin. Neuroanatomy, structural abnormalities, for example in the hypothalamus. Hormones, e.g. a thyroid hormone shortage or elevated levels of cortisol. And genetics. To keep it short, depression is speculated to be about 30 to 40% hereditary or determined by our genes, but there is no solid evidence that there is a specific gene in action that causes depression on their own. It is always an interaction between certain genes, our genetic makeup as a whole, and our environment that triggers a depressive episode to occur. Environmental causes, more often than not, include stressogenic life events such as emotional, sexual, or physical abuse. It has been shown that losing one of your parents before the age of 11 or the separation of your parents during your childhood can lead to structural changes in the brain of the child. More often than not, we need an external trigger to help manifest our genotype into our phenotype, to help our genes express themselves into the being we are right now.
It all began on the day of my actual birth. Both of my parents failed to show up.
In most cases, you were not that unlucky while playing the genetic lottery, but you were unlucky in receiving a certain type of stimulation that in the end led to the manifestation of your worst probable self. Even without major disturbing events during your childhood, a depression can occur. Here is a list of everyday stresses that increase the risk of developing it. Comorbidity is a term that describes two or more disorders or illnesses occurring in the same person, but not necessarily at the same time. The higher the comorbidity of two disorders, the more common they co-occur. Depression and anxiety disorders, for example, often go hand in hand. Of course, no topic of etiology of mental disorders would be complete without implementing the diverse pool of psychological theories regarding the origin of depression. Cognitive approach. Aaron Beck, a pioneer when it comes to the cognitive behavioral therapy, suggests that we can find the cause of depression in the way of our thinking. His so-called theory of the cognitive triad involves automatic, spontaneous, and seemingly uncontrollable negative thoughts about the self, I am worthless and ugly, or I wish I was different, the world, no one values me, or people ignore me all the time, and the future, I'm hopeless because things will never change, or things can only get worse. Those thoughts reinforce each other and let the individual end up in a situation where everything and everyone, including oneself, is of no value or bad. Learned helplessness. Martin Seligman, 1974, proposed an explanation of depression called learned helplessness. According to his theory, depression occurs when a person learns that their attempts to escape negative situations makes no difference. As a consequence, they become passive and will endure adverse stimuli even when escape is easily possible. The repeated exposure to negative situations with no way to escape led to a cognitive, motivational, and emotional deficit and lowered self-esteem. Seligman based his theory on research using dogs. Dogs subjected to inescapable electric shocks later failed to escape from shocks even when it was possible to do so. Moreover, they exhibited some of the symptoms of depression found in humans. Psychodynamic approach. Freud and other psychoanalysts reasoned that depressive symptoms stem from severe superego demands that the ego can't fulfill. In his psychoanalytical theory, the superego plays the critical and moralizing role in the human existence, and if there is a discrepancy between the how we think we should be and act and how we really are and act, anger and depression may follow.
I'm never ever apologizing because I was standing up for a just cause and you were wrong, wrong, wrong. Now if you'll excuse me, I'm going to my room.
That's it, go to your room.
Anger is another reason for becoming depressed. Either the anger of not achieving your ideal self, or the anger towards others that can't be manifested in, for example, words or behavior, will be reflected and directed inwards against oneself. There are many more approaches, and they all have some truth to them, while none of them offers a complete and full picture of depression. In the end, it's all a complicated interaction of many factors, such as biology and genetics, your upbringing, and current environment, all forms of learning, as stated in behaviorism, your cognition, emotions, and motivations, your attitude and attributional style towards the things that happened to you or happen to you right now. While many of those factors may predict a depressive episode in life, there are by no means perfect fortune tellers.
Story, kid. It's the end of the world. God loves you.
Depression has some degree of heritability. Depression tends to run in families. Depression runs more reliably as you look at closer and closer relatives, and you eventually look at identical twins, and if one of them has depression, the other has a 50% chance. Full siblings who are not identical twins, 25% chance, half sibling, about 8%, person off the street, about a 2%, 50% chance when they share the identical genes. What does that do? That tells you this is a disorder that has a genetic component. What does that also tell you? If you've got 50% likelihood, if you've got all the genes in common, and you've got a 50% chance of not getting the depression, it tells you genes are important, but they're not more important than any other component. So genes in depression are not about inevitability, they're about vulnerability.
Your ideas are intriguing to me, and I wish to subscribe to your newsletter.